We're really kind of bridging two things. We're bridging the wrap-up from last year, but then also the start of this school year. So some of the information that I will have to share with you will be data that we saw from kind of a look back from the 2016-17 school year, but then also a look forward as we talk about some specific goals tied to 4 of our cabinet departments, that being human resources, finance, operations, as well as academic services. So we're going to dive right in. First and foremost, we always want to begin in focusing on our mission, vision, and values, and hopefully you've seen these before, but to state them: inspire and equip all learners to discover their voice and unlimited potential, a future-focused community with a passion for lifelong learning, and then values tied to excellence, integrity, collaboration, innovation, as well as growth. In looking to how we operationalize our mission, vision, and values, we focus on our strategic plan, which captures some mission-critical commitments of a vertically aligned curriculum, instructional innovation, personal and social growth in a safe and secure environment, future-focused professionals, partnerships and communication, and then finally, fiscal responsibility. To add a note here, we are actually at a point of sunsetting our existing strategic plan, which will sunset at the end of this year, but then beginning the conversation with our community, soliciting your feedback as to what our next strategic plan looks like. Not necessarily a fixed strategic plan that is put into place for a 5-year period, but something that's a little more agile and flexible to allow us to respond to the various needs that we see within our community and within our schools. So we look forward to continuing that conversation as the year progresses. I love this image because it is truly the best of Liberty. And we landed on this last spring in conversations that we were having with an accreditation team that came to learn more about Liberty Public Schools, to highlight the great work that we're doing, but then also focus on some areas that perhaps we need to stay a little bit more in tune with, or perhaps pay a little focus toward. But if you start in the top left-hand corner and work your way around, you have that small town feel. And that, yes, we're a growing area, we're a suburban area, but at the same time you have that community piece that is reflected in typically a town center or a town square. As you move to the right, you have industry in our backyard that oftentimes people will drive by and have really no sense of what exists in that warehouse or in that industrial building at places like Ford or at places like Magna, places like Holland 1916. If you keep going, you have our higher education partners, namely William Jewell, but other universities and colleges that we partner with and that we connect with for those higher ed experiences and partnerships. And then you have the variety of activities that we provide, from the fine arts to the extracurriculars to the athletics. We have a lot of choice and a lot of opportunity within Liberty Public Schools. Reflected at the bottom center is the partnership that exists between our businesses, our organizations, and opportunities that are provided for kids. In this example, it's students working with Northland Caps at Bank Liberty, and that they're alongside in a bank working on real relevant projects of which students can make an impact in terms of taking problems and developing solutions to be put in place for the benefit of partners, of businesses, and of organizations. And then finally, everything that the metropolitan area has to offer. And so we believe we have a tremendous amount of opportunity, but at the same time, we use the phrase with our faculty and staff that we also believe we're positioned for purpose. And that purpose goes beyond our boundaries, it goes beyond our borders. And that we're not only making an impact for the children in Liberty Public Schools, but we're also bleeding out into our community as well as our state and even our nation as we look to the impact of Liberty. So how does that play out? It plays out in a variety of offerings, from the classroom to our partnerships. And so these are some examples of things that we have going on in Liberty Public Schools, from dealing with the social and emotional issues that students have all the way to the academic needs that they possess and how we move them forward. A variety of partnerships, of programs. This is really just a small glimpse of everything that we do within Liberty Public Schools. And so to look ahead, one of the key questions this time of year is always the question in and around enrollment. What's enrollment look like? And so if you take a look at our K through 12, in addition, you see K through 12 kind of listed up here at the top, but then our early childhood center, our pre-K population is there at the bottom. In total, 12,563 students, and this was as of earlier this week. And so my disclaimer here is that's always subject to change, and that we see kids entering and exiting at times. The Early Childhood Center possesses 235 students. That number actually grows over the course of the year as students age into the program, as we turn the corner from the fall semester to the spring semester. But this is what we track. This helps us in and around enrollment projections. It helps us with teacher-class ratios, student ratios, in terms of being able to map out and plan for what our needs are in terms of meeting students' academic needs. We'll talk a little bit later about demographic projections, in that we're awaiting information right now from our demographer to tell us what that next 5 to 10 year window could potentially look like. With that said, we shared with you, we're kind of on that bridge from last year to this year, and we're in the process of awaiting information from our State Department, from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, as it relates to specific accreditation results that are delivered to us through our annual performance report, or APR. We have a lot of acronyms, but APR is one to recall. APR has a lot of indicators, from academic indicators to attendance to college and career readiness standards. There's a variety of things that are reflected in that APR. We anticipate receiving that first part of October. This year there were a couple of complications tied to assessment results. Many of our kids participated in MAP assessments at the elementary and the middle grade levels. If you have a high schooler, they participated in end of course exams. The issue was really with end of course exams, and that there were 2 tests that were administered that are valid and reliable, but when you take a look at those assessments in a comparison from last year to the year prior to the year before that, there's some validity issues in being able to make those comparisons. So right now they're working on that at the State Department level. Specific assessments were the Algebra 1 exam and English Language Arts 2, I believe, English 2. So as you talk with your students or you talk with your teachers, know, first and foremost, it's a valid test in and of itself, but the comparability piece is really what the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is addressing. That will have implications on our APR as to how they factor that in and fold that in, because they try to do some comparative growth data over the course of the previous years. With all that said, we take information as it relates to our financial information, as it relates to other district information and indicators, our MSIP results through our annual performance report. We take a look at comparative school districts in and around the state of Missouri, of which you can see some of our neighbors here in the Kansas City metropolitan area. We also compare ourselves to others in the St. Louis area that are like size, like demographic, like composition. In October, we'll generate a scorecard, share that with the Board of Education, pull that into our next Coffee with the Community. We share that information throughout Liberty Public Schools. I wanted to highlight each of our cabinet departments, provide you with some information as far as an update, a little bit of data, but then also some goals that each of those departments are working on over the course of this year. So I'm beginning with human resources. You can see as enrollment has increased, we've continued to look at the need to facilitate classroom needs through certified staff and hiring of teachers. And as you can see, in 1990-91, going way back at 270 certified staff all the way to today, at the end of last year, 880 staff. We welcomed in August 100 new teachers. Now those aren't necessarily 100 new positions, because we had some people that left the district or some people that retired, but in August at our new Teacher Institute, we were able to welcome over 100 teachers to the system. Once school started, we started adding a couple of additional positions as we saw a few sections that were a little bit higher and began to fill those needs at the classroom level. Additional information that is oftentimes looked at would be the certified staff education level, and that we believe that Liberty is a destination district, and that is reflected in the types of staff or teachers that we attract and that we recruit. So as you look at their years of experience and staffing levels as far as education levels, the blue indicates those that possess solely a bachelor's degree, and you can see the percentages over time. But then you can also see those that have a higher degree attainment in that they possess a master's degree or above. At the conclusion of last year, 77.6% of our certificated staff possessed a master's degree or higher. In comparing that to years of experience, you can see that we have a little bit more veteran staff. The yellow line indicates those that have 6 or more years of experience, and then the blue line below indicates those that are a little bit earlier on in their career or the profession, and that they're in that 0 to 5 year range. So 84% roughly at that 6 or more years, 16% under the 5-year mark in terms of their overall years of experience. Specific goals that have been identified by Dr. Vogelaar and his team, the first of which is a Grow Your Own program. And this is really an effort to encourage high schoolers and students to pursue education as a career. whether it's through our education internship program or whether it's through opportunities to observe and get involved through A+ and a variety of things. We want to encourage people to pursue education because we certainly want quality. And not only that, but we also want to encourage minority students to be able to pursue this as a profession as well. And so we're working closely with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education through the Equity Lab in an effort to develop our Grow Your Own program. In addition to that, Dr. Vogelaar and his team did a whirlwind tour of the district over the course of last year. I believe facilitated over 40 different work groups or tabletop conversations, focus groups, to be able to identify strengths, challenges, areas of need that we possess within our school district, reported those to Team Liberty, which is kind of our advisory council that makes up both our certificated as well as support staff, solicited a tremendous amount of feedback, is processing that feedback, and then working with departments and schools to be able to develop specific goals and how we can address some of those challenges that were identified or continue the great work that we have going on within our system. The last thing is a focus on wellness and being able to provide additional wellness opportunities. We're in the throes right now of our health insurance renewal. Appreciate Team Liberty for all of their work in processing that and making those difficult decisions and conversations that are being had over the course of the last several weeks. Shifting over to operations, the summer is an incredibly busy time, and we have typically about $3 to $3.5 million in capital projects that occur over the course of the summer. A few of which, some of the larger ones, are indicated here. Oftentimes those projects are unseen in that they may involve HVAC units on a rooftop, or they may be something buried underground or something that we have to address. But you may have noticed, particularly if you have middle school students, some changes to our entry processes at the building level, in that we're working on safe and secure entries. We've done several of our elementaries over the last couple of years, continuing that Discovery Middle School, South Valley Middle School, as well as Heritage reflected here. In addition, at Liberty High School, you see these two rooms that are on the far right, same room, just different angles, but in essence trying to restructure and reclaim, so to speak, additional space at Liberty High School to support and facilitate classroom needs tied to the arts and our fine arts program. And so we're continuing to address that in Liberty High School. In addition to that, many of you participated and have experienced our activities complexes over the course of the opening of school. Liberty North, Liberty High School, through the building campaign, we're able to have activity complexes built through the contributions of many of our community members, our businesses and organizations, through charitable giving, through sponsorship opportunities, through naming rights. But we were welcomed into the school year by opening these complexes, and they've really been beneficial. Not only have activities benefited from it, but as we've had conversations about it, it really has been even bigger than that, in that it creates a sense of community. Not been in place at Liberty High School or at Liberty North from that standpoint. So it's been a great opening. Certainly look forward to finishing these projects. We'll talk a little bit about that, but as the season ends this fall, we'll continue our work as it relates both to Liberty North as well as to Liberty High School. A couple of key goals in continuing the work at the complexes. Concession and restroom buildings will be finalized later this year. We're working to get through the fall sports athletic season. Once that concludes, we'll continue to work through that, but then also finalizing our operating procedures now that we have these complexes in place, putting some structure and procedures in place and around how we operate and utilize those spaces. Many of you were involved in conversations last year around the long-range master plan and appreciate the feedback that we received in identifying planning criteria. And so as we move forward into this year, we've picked back up with our Board of Education in that work, and looking to finalize our plan, develop that master plan, which is contingent upon demographic projections. As you saw the growth in terms of our enrollment this year at 12,563, we are in the process of revising our demographic projection, working with an individual here of the Kansas City area, a gentleman by the name of Preston Smith, who is working and talking with economic development, talking with the City of Liberty, the City of Kansas City, seeing what development is out there, what space is potential in our community for growth and residential and commercial population and so forth. We anticipate getting those figures back sometime in October. To back up for a second, our prior demographic projections showed a trajectory between 2 to 3% growth. What we know thus far is that that could slow down a little bit, and that it could be more between 1.5% to 2%. It's still in that upward direction, but it is slowing down a little bit, is what we're told thus far. So that's subject to change. We'll know that information a little bit later on this fall, which then will inform and help us finalize our long-range master plan. By the end of this semester, what we would like to be able to do is to identify options, select the best plan, and have that in place. And I'll give you an example of what that will look like in terms of its format. But there's two things that really fall into that long-range plan. It's the ability to capture projects, prioritize them, identify what our building level needs are. But then it's also the ability to categorize them, whether they sit over here on a list of capital projects that we continue to work on over the course of a year or over the course of the summer. But then also those items that we feel can be placed in front of our community on a ballot issue or on a ballot measure. And so as we've shared before, looking at a possible bond election, which would then be a no tax levy increase that could occur either in the spring or fall of 2018. But that is predicated on what our demographic projections look like, but then also the projects that we identify and prioritize. So that's a lot of work to be done not only this fall, but in the event we place something on the ballot in the spring, a lot of preparation that has to go into that process. So we're having those conversations with our Board of Education at our study sessions and our regular meetings. We do look to have an additional community engagement opportunity later this fall just to reveal the plan, to show what the projects are that we've identified through feedback from our community, and then also kind of chart a course moving forward in and around whether or not to place the bond issue on a ballot. So here are the steps in the long-range planning process. We completed step 3 last year. Currently are exploring options with our Board of Education, and as I shared earlier, the intent is to adopt the best plan at the end of this first semester so that we have that in place. And so the format of it looks like this. And don't worry about squinting and seeing the fine print. This is a previous plan that we had in place. But over on the left-hand side, what we would want to capture here particularly is those projects that perhaps would sit in one of those two spaces. Either projects that sit on a capital plan, of which we would do during the year or during the summer out of our capital fund, or perhaps those projects that would fall on a potential bond issue. So listed out to the left, what you will see in the end will end up being those projects that have been identified and whether they're intended to be capital improvements, capital projects, or whether they're intended potentially to fall on a bond issue. In addition to that, you have the timeline that is set aside that gives you a little bit more detail that kind of shows in and around what we believe would be the time frame for beginning, initiating those projects, but then also completing those projects. And then as you look at these dotted lines, what you would end up seeing there is the possibility of a bond issue. And so be looking for that. As that information is finalized, we'll certainly look to provide that out to the community as well as to patrons and staff within our school district. Shifting over to finances, in general, our budget for the year is anywhere from $150 to $160 million. And the way you can splice that out in looking at revenues and expenditures is that our revenues are kind of made up of these large pools or these large pots reflected in this pie graph. From the local level, primarily through property taxes, 54.83% of our revenue comes to us in the form of property taxes. In addition to that, at the state level, shifting over to the other side, about 40.1% comes to us in the form of the state foundation formula in terms of state funding. You can see the smaller slices, county revenue, which comes in the form of forms, fines, escheats, M&M surtax. We can get pretty technical pretty quick. But then at the federal level, you have about 3% of our funding that comes through federal dollars, part of which is for IDEA, which was the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, title funds, nutrition funds that come through the federal government as well. And then there are a couple of smaller items that we just capture as other, in and around other revenues that come to the school district. When you look at our expenditures, they are comprised of these categories, but there's a little bit of a distinction this year as compared to previous years. If you've looked at businesses and organizations and their expenses, typically about 70% of their expenditures are tied up in people. So salaries and benefits. As you'll note here, and I verified this morning, 37.82% is tied to salaries, about 11.64% is tied to benefits. Typically, in any given year, this number sits at a little higher rate. Typically, it's about 52%. The reason why it's 37.82% this year is because of this number over here. In essence, we have some restructuring and some refinancing that's occurring with our debt services, and that we're expending $75 million this year to refinance and do some crossover refunding of bond issues. So that's why that percentage is a little bit higher. In typical years, This would be closer to 11%, and then this would end up being closer to 52%. So if you go back and you look to our budget and you see the historical data that's captured there, it shows those typical years, but then it shows captured in our expenditures what that looks like for this year. Just wanted to clarify that. Capital projects, 4.31%, materials and supplies, 6.54%, purchase services, you can see reflected there as well. But that in a nutshell is what our finances reflect. We typically approve our budget in June for the following fiscal year, and then during the course of the summer conduct an audit. Appreciate our business services team and working with our auditors closely, and had a successful audit. That report to the Board of Education will actually be conveyed and delivered at our October board meeting. So we look forward to sharing that information. A couple of key areas of focus, focusing on the revenue streams that are coming to us from the state, local, and federal levels to ensure that we're maximizing those and realizing that those allocations. Taking a look at a needs-based approach or zero-based approach that we've had in place for the last couple of years as it relates to supporting our mission, supporting the operations of the district in an effort to provide a balanced budget. And then also compliance with internal and external accountability, but also working with each of our departments and schools to ensure that we can operationalize and maximize efficiencies. That's key for us in terms of making certain that we're using our dollars to support students and their academic needs. In addition to finance, I want to switch over to the academic services piece. Last spring, you may have received a survey or may have been interviewed by an accreditation team that came through our system referred to as Advanced Ed. And through that accreditation process, they came in and surveyed faculty, staff, students, parents. They also came and did walkthroughs. They interviewed the board, interviewed myself, and were able to identify several powerful practices in their time here in Liberty Public Schools. We celebrated on April 4th with a kind of a wrap-up visit with our Board of Education in which they revealed these powerful practices, including communicating information about the district as it relates to student and school performance, our evaluation process and supervision of administration, teachers, and the like, a culture of continuous improvement, autonomy that is provided throughout the system all the way down to our school level, technology, the infrastructure and the support that exists, highly qualified employees across our system. But then they also identified a couple of improvement priorities. And you should be seeing some of this work that were identified in these improvement priorities and steps that are currently being taken in an effort to address that. Going into that advanced accreditation review, we knew our grading policy could be an issue, and we were working on that last year, and you've seen that culminating result here early this fall. As you're taking a look at the proficiency-based report card if you have elementary children and the communication efforts that have been put forward in that respect. The second piece there is communicating each school's purpose and mission regularly. In a nutshell, we need to do a better job of telling our story. And so we started those conversations at convocation with our whole faculty and basically identifying the need to do a better job of telling our story. But then we're starting to see that in efforts that we have in place already. So avenues like Quick News, our LPS educator, other communication from the building level. You may have seen a student intern by the name of Josie, who's delivering the LPS Insider, and she's already got a couple of those under her belt, I believe. So we're looking forward to pushing that information out and doing a little bit better job of that. And it's twofold. It's celebrating the successes that we have, but it's also identifying some of the challenges that we have and soliciting opportunity for people to engage and identify solutions and meeting some of those problems or challenges that we face. In addition, with academic services, as we bridge the 16-17 year and look into 17-18, a couple of things come to mind. At the state level, the finalizing of curriculum standards. If you followed this discussion from the Common Core state standards now to the finalizing Missouri learning standards, it's been quite a journey in multiple years. They've landed that, and so now it's been a matter of aligning our curriculum, but then a couple of key focus areas that you see in the center: balanced literacy approach, project-based learning, arts integration. We could add STEM into this as we have PLTW and other things that are in place. And then shifting to 17-18, and it's that curricular implementation. I'll say this about our faculty and our staff in academic services and throughout our schools, is they are looked at as an example across the state of Missouri. and oftentimes are leaned on or tapped on their shoulder in terms of providing insight into the work that we're doing within Liberty Public Schools. So I want to commend them in and around the work that they do in advancing not only Liberty Public Schools, but as we talked about being positioned for a purpose earlier, having an impact across the entire state of Missouri. So that comes through a tremendous amount of support of our teachers in professional learning and professional growth, whether it's through visible learning, which is research tied to best practice and instructional strategies based on their efficacy, and that there's an ability to calculate the efficacy of an instructional practice and gains as it relates to student academic achievement, to where you can know if that strategy or approach is truly delivering or producing as it relates to academic growth. In addition to that, content developed tied back to that curricular alignment and implementation. And then up at the top, project-based learning, continuing in terms of that training and support through the Buck Institute. So this professional learning will occur and will continue over the course of this year. We'll see it delivered tomorrow, actually, as our faculty and staff will be in session. Students get the day off, but we'll have a variety of professional learning and professional development opportunities for both elementary, middle level, as well as high school teachers and staff. Aside from the academic or achievement support, you also have a variety of needs among our learners. And so we want to try to provide support through conscious discipline, through trauma training, and through social and emotional needs being met. That comes with additional professional training for our faculty and staff. And then how do we meet the social emotional needs of students? How do we deal with students that have experienced trauma? And that what the research tells us is that oftentimes when a traumatic experience occurs, the recovery from that or the impact or the spillover into other areas of life can somewhat be monumental. And so how do we assist kids? How do we come alongside teachers and train them, equip them with the tools that they need in order to support kids? Because we know that if their social emotional needs are met, then the academics can follow in terms of meeting their academic needs. You can't do one without the other. So we appreciate the work of academic services and everything that they've done over the course of last year, the summer, and then gearing up for the 2017-18 school year. I want to end with this, and you may have heard me share this in multiple settings, and that's okay because it's the message we want to communicate. And it's really our attempt to try to answer the question, what does it mean to be learner-centered? Oftentimes people may use things interchangeably as far as student-centered or learner-centered or learner-driven. But we've identified a couple of key priorities. We know that it starts with relationships. But it maybe looks different than the relationships that we experienced as students. And not always is that teacher at the front of the room delivering and that two-way relationship's occurring. But oftentimes that student or teacher, that teacher may step aside and allow that student to come to the front of the class, and that student may actually know more about an area of interest or something that they're passionate about than that teacher does. Perhaps it's that teacher coming alongside a student in more of a mentor capacity or a support role, or maybe it's an exploratory role where that student comes and says, hey, I'm really interested in this, what do you know about it? And maybe at first that teacher may say, I don't know anything, but let's figure it out together. So the relationship is important, we know that, but perhaps it's a little bit different in the context of 21st century learning. Informed decision making is another key priority, but it's twofold. It's taking a look at student information and data that's readily available to us and identifying solutions to issues that may exist. But then we complement that with instructional best practices. And we need to ensure that our teachers are equipped with those strategies to ensure that they're able to triage, so to speak, in those instances in which they need something different that may not work for that individual student or that individual learner. In addition to that, it's personalization, that we can truly personalize, bless you, the experience for our kids all the way down to those 12,563 students. And believe me, that's a challenge, but I think we can do that if we truly know our kids and we can know what their actual needs are and how they tick, so to speak. Agency is another key component to this, and that has everything to do with choice. A student's choice and a student's ability to own their learning as it relates to things that they're interested in, things that they want to pursue, things they want to explore. And as we shared earlier on that screenshot, we have a lot of those opportunities, from Northland CAPS to PLTW to a lot of other things that occur in our classrooms in which students can explore things that they're interested in, college degrees that they perhaps want to pursue, or career exploration. And you know what? If they pursue something and they find that that's not for them, that's been successful. We want them to do that earlier in life as compared to later in life or multiple times later in life. We want them to have that exposure earlier. The last thing is a growth mindset. Whether it's our Board of Education or our youngest early childhood student at the ECC, we want that growth mindset to be in place for every single one of us, and that we don't ever want to get to a point where we're static or complacent, but that we're constantly learning, we're constantly growing, we're constantly exploring, and we're doing that in community. In addition to these vision priorities and what it means to be learner-centered, we believe that there's something else out there, and we call this the edge of vision. And it's being able to take the best of these three components, the best of the classroom, the best of the resources that are available at fingertips nowadays through inquiry, through internet, through resources that are available, but then also that experiential piece. What happens when the three of these come together? At the center, there's an apex, where a student in a classroom has a teacher that is able to relate with them, that's connected with them. They're able to tap into a variety of resources, but they're also able to bring in the partnerships piece. Or maybe they're able to leave the classroom and have experiences outside of the classroom in the community, where they're exploring medicine, they're exploring industry, they're exploring technology, they're exploring manufacturing or aviation, whatever that might look like. We believe this is the edge of vision, and it has everything to do with competency-based education. And that how can we connect students and the classroom with business partners around a key set of competencies that then that business partner and teacher can begin to work on to provide that relevant learning experience for students. If you follow and you research and you listen to education and the pursuits that are going across the country, we believe that this is really kind of that next thing on the horizon. So we have our vision priorities, but we have that edge of vision that we believe we need to always be kind of thinking about and exploring and experimenting with in terms of how that will impact us in the future. So that's a little bit about our district as to where we're at right now in the month of September. In October, we'll certainly bring more information to you as it relates to our annual performance report and our scorecard, but would certainly want to open it up at this point for any questions that you may have. Any questions this morning from the group that's here? Anything? Okay. Yes, thank you. I'm not afraid of questions.
The exploring and getting outside of the classroom, is that something that's focused mostly at high school level? Or
That is a great question.
Are you taking that?
So it's twofold. Primarily high school level. And so Colleen Jones, who I don't know if she's here, I don't see her this morning, but okay, she's in Iowa. Colleen is actually in charge of that aspect as it relates to college, career, and then some of those partnership opportunities. I'd say right now it's predominantly at the high school level. I had her crunch some numbers a few weeks back, and we have about 500 students that for a portion of their day are off campus in some capacity. It may be 1 hour in that they're doing an A+ assignment at, say, Lewis and Clark Elementary. Or it may be half the day where they're at a career center, or it may be 3 hours where they're participating in Northland CAPS. Our hope is to be able to take some semblance of that experience and push it down into the younger grades. Not that middle schoolers and elementaries are going to be, all across the city, but they'll be participating in field trips. They'll be going and seeing different industries. We've had some collaboration between a couple of our elementaries and Holland 1916, where they will be able to go in and see what advanced manufacturing looks like. And it's that kind of aha moment. It's not the Laverne and Shirley assembly line like we would think of, where it's somewhat dirty manufacturing. It's the exact opposite. It's pretty advanced, where you have the robotics and you have more technology and equipment at play than perhaps you have employees on the floor. So how can we replicate those experiences? The third example that I would fold in here is the ability to take our teachers and do the very same thing with them. So you take teachers out of the classroom and you allow them to have a field trip of their own where they go and they visit industry. Maybe they go to Cerner, maybe they go to Liberty Hospital, and they see what those industries are like. But then what they're able to come back with is they come back to their classrooms and they bring relevant problems tied to those organizations that then they can work with their students on. And so we've had about a dozen teachers for the last 3 summers that have participated in a summer externship experience. They go off-site, they work with an industry or a company, they work to try to find a problem, bring that problem back in the fall semester, deliver it to kids and say, okay guys, how are we going to solve this problem? And then it culminates in the spring of a showcase or a presentation by those students and that teacher to that company, that organization, that industry as to here is how we might approach this problem that you've identified as an organization. So how early can you do that? I think you can do it as early as kindergarten to some extent. So we're looking to try to do more of that as we kind of see what that edge of vision looks like. Thanks for the question.
That would be great.
Yeah. Yes, D.
Can you talk a little bit about the STEAM bus that is out now?
Yes, so that has been a partnership, and you may have not seen that just yet because it's still kind of in its prototype. But we have been piloting a little bit at Lewis and Clark Elementary with a couple of elementary classes and taking them through and kind of seeing how literally the flow of traffic goes. But through the support of Academic Services, the Education Foundation, and a variety of partners, our technology department that's been back here, they have been outfitting an old school bus. And it's a STEAM bus, and the intent is to be able to pull science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and arts integration into an experience that then could be pulled around the district. And so if you think of makerspaces like what we have in our libraries across the system, it's a makerspace on wheels, but then it involves like a tremendous amount of technology. So you have LCD screens that are doing various things in stations. You have a couple of products. I'm going to throw some names out of which I don't know a lot about, but the kids can tell you about it. Products like Osmo, Ozobot, and Z-Space. I know a little bit about Z-Space. Z-Space is an interactive 3D software program curriculum in which you can literally upload a variety of things, but the one that I got to experience was a heart, in that you can literally take a pen, you have some 3D glasses on, and you pull this heart out, not literally, you pull this heart out of a screen and you're able to manipulate the pen and see the inner workings of the heart. And then you're able to pull layers away from it. I believe you can do that with like the skeletal system, the muscular system, and different pieces where you're able to literally have a dissection without having a cadaver, so to speak. So we were visiting with that earlier this week. We had it at our board meeting in the parking lot. Our board members got to get on and see kids interacting and doing various things on that. So we're fine-tuning that and look forward to pushing that out in the schools here in the coming weeks. So thanks for that, Dee. Yes, sir.
As you see the population of the district continue to increase and obviously Northland changing, what are you seeing as it relates to community members in social, economic, emotional needs? Just what are you observing?
Social, emotional, and economic. So the economic impact is huge, obviously, whether it's the residential impact or the commercial impact. But as you take a look and you drive around your neighborhoods, I'm sure, or the community, and you can watch traffic on occasion and see that it just continues to escalate and get worse. But we do have a lot of development going on from that standpoint. We are in tune with developers, but then also city government. And the reality of it is that oftentimes developers come at it with a desire to build, but they don't have the means to do that, so then they have to look toward economic development incentives. And the impact on the school district, going back to that pie chart earlier, of which the majority of revenue that we received, a large chunk of it, comes in the form of property taxes. If they go after property taxes for their economic development, then that obviously takes revenue away from the system, while students are being introduced into schools. And so there's that delicate balance of support for economic development, but at the same time, caution, because we know commercial TIFs and economic development incentives look and feel different than residential TIFs and economic development incentives in place, because the residential piece typically will come with a student population. And so we're ingrained in a lot of conversations with our city government, with economic development councils, TIF commissions, and the like, and I appreciate Mr. Anderson and Cindy Sullivan staying close to that, as well as our Board of Education. In respect to the social and emotional piece, you may have gone to the voting polls back in August and seen Proposition 1 on the ballot, which was the Children's Services Fund. The Children's Services Fund is a sales tax that was actually passed very narrowly back in August to create the Children's Services Fund. We're currently at a place in which they're working to identify members from within the community to serve on that fund, to be able to allocate resources to mental health providers that then will deliver services to students under the age of 18 that reside within Clay County. So that's not just Liberty Public Schools, it's our entire county. One statistic that I heard 3 years ago when we moved to this district was that, and it's not one that you want to lead in, was that Clay County had one of the highest rates of teen suicide. And that's something that we certainly need to wrap our arms around and be able to provide some supports and resources for young people that are dealing with those struggles, but then also substance abuse, other mental health issues, and we believe that this will create an opportunity for kids throughout Clay County. We know that it will generate approximately $8 million, and that $8 million will be provided to a variety of mental health providers and school districts alike to be able to identify supports for students. There's an application process or a grant process that needs to be completed, delivered to the Children's Services Fund Board. They'll walk through those grants and then be able to provide funds accordingly. The other thing that we have in place is a variety of partners across our community, from business to church organizations to civic organizations that come alongside and support us. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Colleen Jones and the mentoring opportunities that are available. We'll get you an application if you're interested. There are a variety of mentoring opportunities with younger kids, whether it's through reading programs, through volunteering, through PTA and the like. Benevolence opportunities as it relates to backpack programs, clothing banks, food distribution, utility support. We have a lot in our community, so appreciate all of our community partners and the work that they do in that space. What else from the group? You may have a question that you want to do offline, so by all means feel free to do that. We'll turn it over to Dallas for final word if there's anything to share.
I really have nothing more to add other than be sure to, if you have an opportunity, we will be back here in October 19th. As Dr. Tucker mentioned earlier, our academic services team will be here, and we look forward to their information. So let's give Dr. Tucker a big hand for joining us and kicking off
Thank
this.
you.
And as always, if you ever need anything from us in our communications office, be sure to reach out. We're just down the hallway here. So.
Thank you all. Have a good rest of the week.